Adopting IFRS is like starting a family. It is done with careful planning, commitment, and a complete understanding of the implications. Setting these priorities and plans is the first step towards adopting IFRS. But before we understand the concept with respect to IFRS, let us first know the basic meaning of the term adopt, adapt, and converge. Adopt and adapt share almost similar spellings and similar meanings, but they do not mean one and the same thing. Adoption is the act of taking something as your own. Adoption usually refers to legal process of becoming a non-biological parent, but it also refers to the act of embracing an idea. Adoption comes from old French word adopter, which means to choose for oneself. It can be anything that is taken as one's own. If one dresses like some person, that amounts to an adoption of that person's style. To adapt is to become or make something suitable to an environment or condition. An inability to adapt will prove an obstacle on the road to success. Adapt is to get used to something that is already there, meaning that a change has already been made and you need to change in order to fit in that change. Adopt is to bring in something new, which means to make a change. After studying this module, you shall be able to know the meaning of the term adoption, adaptation, and convergence. Identify the difference between adoption and adaptation. Understand the implementation process of IFRS. Analyze the advantages and disadvantages of adopting IFRS and learn the reasons for adoption of IFRS. Let us now discuss about the difference between adoption and adaptation. Number 1. Adapt implies change either in the instigator or the item, while adopt means to accept as it is and incorporate. 2. The word adoption refers to fostering, whereas the word adaptation, on the other hand, refers to the usage to adjust to. This is primarily the difference between the two words, namely adoption and adaptation. 3. In other words, it can be said that the word adoption gives the meaning of decision to bring up or foster. 4. And lastly, when talking about adoption, one should remember that there are some strict rules regarding adoption which need to be followed while adopting, whereas adaptation is also a term used when work is adapted into another form. We shall understand about adoption, adaptation, and convergence. Number 1. Apart from the term adopt and adapt, there is also a term called as convergence. In general, convergence is coming together of two or more distinct entities or phenomena. Convergence is increasingly prevalent in the IT world. In this context, the term refers to the combination of two or more different technologies in a single device. Taking pictures with a cell phone and surfing the web on a television are two of the most common examples of this trend. 2. Because IFRS are original standards created by the IFRS Foundation, Through its standard setting body, the IASB, the IFRS Foundation, owns the worldwide copyright to IFRS in all languages and therefore owns the exclusive right to reproduce or authorize others to reproduce or translate IFRS. The IFRS Foundation enters into a variety of different copyright agreements, each based on legal framework surrounding a country's adoption strategy. 3. Many jurisdictions have cultural, legal, or political obstacles to an immediate full adoption of IFRS. In the light of those obstacles, some countries decide on strategies of continuous convergence with IFRS. 4. They have decided to bring their national standards to a point where the amounts reported in the financial statements are the same as in case of IFRS financial statements. We respect the reason why those jurisdictions reach that decision and work with them to support their convergence process. 5. However, in doing so, it is the ultimate objective to make full adoption of IFRS possible, because only then will a country be able to fully benefit from the advantages of using IFRS. 6. While convergence may be the necessary preparation for some countries to adopt IFRS, the simplest, least costly, and the most straightforward approach is to adopt the complete body of IFRS for long-term convergence. 7. The main reason why most companies want to use IFRS in their financial statements is the ability to demonstrate to the investor community that their financial statements are IFRS compliant. For that purpose, it is not sufficient that the standards have converged. The only way to make a valid claim is to apply all these standards as issued by IASB and make the compliance representation required by IASB. Hence, while convergence is good, adoption is necessary to be truly able to harvest the benefits of the change. Now moving on to the implementation process of IFRS. IFRS can be implemented through various ways, such as: number 1, adopting the standard setters process of setting accounting standards. 2. Rubber stamping each standard issued by IASB so that they become mandatory to apply in that country, thereby replacing national accounting standards with IFRS. 3. Endorsing IFRS on a standard by standard basis as issued by IASB with possibility of some differences, or not endorsing some of the standards. 4. Fully converging national standards towards those issued by IASB. 5. Partially converging national standards towards IFRS. 6. Merely permitting the use of IASB standards. 7. Once a jurisdiction has decided on the path it will follow, the task moves from policy to project management. 3. The key to a successful transition, whether the problem is manufacturing, retailing, or accounting, is to build a plan for the transition. 9. In the case of IFRS transition, there is a real risk of planning too small. Certainly, a change in accounting standard affects the accounting profession, companies, and financial regulators. 10. A successful IFRS team involves every sector that will be affected by the change. It does no good to have a team from the accounting profession but not include the company regulation department. 11. The members of the team should have the power to make things happen in their individual circles and should have reasonable decision making powers. 12. There will be problems in which it seems that existing IFRS do not consider or cover a particular situation that may be important in that country of adoption. In Korea, for example, local accounting accumulates transition issues through the Korean Accounting Standards Board. Papers are prepared either by the accounting firms, companies, or the KASB staff. Then the issues are discussed at roundtable sessions in which one participates. The objective is not to produce Korea-specific answers but to gain a full discussion of the facts and possible solutions and necessary actions. 13. It is crucially important for the success of IFRS project to build up an infrastructure of knowledgeable IFRS practitioners. This is especially important for stock exchange and financial regulators, but obviously extends to universities and the legal actuarial professions. Fortunately, many groups are actively involved in IFRS training, including the major accounting firms, professional bodies like the ACCA and the World Bank. We shall now discuss the advantages of adopting IFRS. As you have learned in the earlier modules, the International Accounting Standards Board, that is IASB, was formed in the year 2001 to replace the International Accounting Standards Committee IASC for developing international accounting standards that are universally accepted. The worldwide adoption of IFRS provides the following benefits. Number 1. Globalization of the capital markets. These days, more stock exchange markets are willing to accept financial statements prepared according to IFRS for filing purposes. 2. Worldwide adoption of IFRS provides multinational corporations with reliable and comparable information that helps these corporations to evaluate and select the best investment alternative. 3. Adoption of IFRS will reduce the cost of the international auditing and consulting services provided by the international accounting firms. 4. The auditors do not need to understand the local accounting standards of many countries because they apply IFRS. It therefore brings uniformity in auditing. 5. Many developing countries have adopted IFRS as their national standards. For some of them, it may have been less expensive and more comprehensive than developing their own standards. 6. The need to attract foreign investment is also an influencing factor for adopting IFRS. 7. And lastly, worldwide adoption of IFRS produces comparable financial information needed by many international organizations such as United Nations, European Union, and the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, that is OECD. Let us now understand some disadvantages in adopting of IFRS. Number 1. The most noteworthy disadvantage of IFRS relates to the cost related to application by multinational companies which comprise of changing the internal system to make it compatible with new reporting standards, training costs, etc. 2. The issue of regulating IFRS in all countries, as it will not be possible due to various reasons beyond IASB or IASC control, as they cannot enforce the application of IFRS by all countries of the world. 3. Issues such as extraordinary loss or gain which are not allowed in the new IFRS still remain an issue. 4. Another major disadvantage of converting to IFRS makes the IASB the monopolist in terms of setting the standards, and this will be strengthened if IFRS is adopted by US companies. 5. If there is a competition, such IFRS versus GAAP, there is more chance of having reliable and useful information that will be produced during the course of competition. 6. The key problem in conversion to IFRS that has stressed with high importance is the use of fair value as the primary basis of asset liability measurements. 7. Another disadvantage of IFRS is that IFRS is quite complex and costly, and if the adoption of IFRS needs or required by small or medium-sized businesses, it will be a big disadvantage for SMEs as they will be hit by large transition costs and the level of complexity of IFRS may not be absorbed by SMEs. Let us take example of some countries which have adopted, adapted or converged with the IFRS. Number 1. The United States of America. In the US, FASB, that is Financial Accounting Standards Board, has engaged in an active effort to seek convergence of US GAAP with IFRS. The following are some examples of FASB's activities. In September 2002, the FASB and IASB signed the Norwalk Agreement, in which they agreed to work towards the convergence of their two sets of financial reporting standards and make them fully compatible as soon as practicable. On February 27, 2006, the two organizations, namely FASB and IASB, issued a Memorandum of Understanding, that is MOU 2006, that not only reaffirmed their objectives of developing common standards but also set forth with some specificity the goals they sought to achieve by 2008. The two boards agreed to undertake a short-term project to remove a variety of differences that existed between FIRS and US GAAP. The scope of the short-term convergence projects is limited to those differences between two sets of standards in which convergence is likely to be achieved in the short run. Convergence is expected to occur by selecting either existing US GAAP or IFRS requirements as the high-quality solution. In February 2007, the FASB issued SFAS 159, that is the fair value option for financial assets and financial liabilities, which provides companies with an option to report selected financial assets and liabilities at fair values, bringing US GAAP and IFRS closer together. The SEC, that is Security Exchange Commission in the US, has been highly supportive of convergence. It publicly welcomed the 2006 MOU. Also, in November 2007, the SEC removed the requirement that foreign private companies using IFRS must reconcile their financial statements to US GAAP. 2. European Union. In July 2002, a regulation was passed by European Parliament and European Council of Ministries requiring the adoption of international standards issued by IASB. As a result of this regulation, all EU listed companies were required to prepare their financial statements following IFRS beginning in 2005. The aim was to improve the quality of corporate financial reporting by increasing their comparability and transparency, and to promote the development of a single capital market in Europe. The non-listed companies continue to apply their own national GAAP. The EU has adopted the strategy of replacing national GAAP with IFRS regarding the presentation of consolidated financial statements of listed companies. There is a wide variety of accounting enforcement systems in Europe. Some countries such as Germany, Finland and the Netherlands have also no institutional oversight of financial reporting. Further, the enterprises that are expected to apply IFRS in Europe are heterogeneous in terms of jurisdiction, size, capital structure, ownership structure, and degree of accounting sophistication. Thus, adopting IFRS will reduce such differences. 3. Japan. The Accounting Standard Boards of Japan, ASBJ, published release of projects, plans and initiatives towards international convergence of accounting standards on 6 December 2007. Convergence of Japanese GAAP and IFRS is expected by 2011. 4. Canada. The Chartered Institution of Canadian Accountants, CICA, provided information and learning resources on the transition to International Financial Reporting Standards, IFRS, and International Standards on Auditing, ISA, through their transition to International Standards website. Canada will require all public companies to use IFRS standards beginning from 2011. 5. Hong Kong. The information paper setting Hong Kong Financial Reporting Standards in June 2006 states that Hong Kong Financial Reporting HKFRS standards were fully converged with International Financial Reporting Standards with effect from January 1, 2005. This convergence arose from a decision by the Council of Hong Kong Institute of Certified Public Accountants in 2001 after board discussion with interested parties. Now let us understand about the convergence adoption issues. Reasons for adopting IFRS is the first area that we will now understand. Adoption is a team effort. Every team needs a captain, though an IFRS adoption is no exception. Countries have managed a successful adoption. All seem to have identified a single organization that drives the process. This should ideally be the statutory authority that has the responsibility to set the applicable accounting standards. Few countries and few team leaders have the power to mandate the adoption of IFRS. In most cases, reaching a decision requires consensus. For some countries, the decision is obvious. They lack the resources to develop local standards. Even if they develop local standards, they first find that their financial reporting framework is not recognized in international markets. Some countries focus on the credibility of their capital markets. They find that adopting IFRS helps to eliminate the country discount that can arise from investors' uncertainty about local accounting standards. Some see the adoption of IFRS as means to ease local companies' access to foreign capital markets. Others seek to minimize the costs borne by the local companies that have foreign subsidiaries in countries that have adopted IFRS. Others conclude that costs of maintaining a high quality national standard setting process will exceed any tangible or intangible benefits. Problems in convergence is the next we will understand. It is expensive. A convergence program requires almost as much time, effort and cost as creation of freestanding local standards. It does not eliminate country discount. It does not provide comparability from one year to the other. IFRS are always changing, although many of the changes are small. In contrast, a country that adopts a few IFRS each year makes it difficult for users of financial statements to compare one year with the other year. We will now understand response of various countries to IFRS. The IASB 2010 suggests that more than 100 countries now require or permit the use of IFRS or are converging. This gives a misleading impression of the prevalence of IFRS and hides a bewildering array of responses, some of which are described below. 1. Adopting the IFRS process. This is the purest form of IFRS implementation, where the regulation in a jurisdiction requires companies to use IFRS as issued by IASB, whatever these may be at the time. Very few countries have done this, but Israel is one. 2. Inserting IFRS into law. This is another way of implementing IFRS. It might have been the country's traditional way of imposing domestic accounting standards. This involves delays in making IFRS available to companies. But it need not mean different dates of compulsory application from the dates of IFRS as issued by IASB. Canada from 2011 and South Africa for unlisted companies have taken this route. 3. Endorsing IFRS. This is the response of EU. It involves detailed scrutiny of all IFRS output, standard by standard, amendment by amendment. In the case of EU, many bodies are involved and the process can take well over 1 year, running the risk that even the IASB's compulsory application dates will be missed. Another problem is that IFRS 9 issued by IASB in 2009 can be used in South Africa, Switzerland, but not in European Union, even for 2011, as the EU did not start the process of endorsement. 4. Fully converging with IFRS. This method of implementation is used in Australia. The Australian Accounting Standards Board takes the IASB's output and amends it in various ways, giving it an Australian number, making textual changes, banning early adoption and deleting some options between 2005 and 2007. 5. Adapting IFRS. A country can take IFRS as a starting point, but then make various changes. China has done this. For 2007 onwards, the consolidated statements of Chinese listed companies must use a set of standards based on IFRS. Another approach is that of Venezuela, which adopted IFRS en bloc in 2004, but had not adopted all the subsequent changes to IFRS. 6. Allowing IFRS. A country can permit companies to use IFRS instead of national GAAP. For example, Switzerland allows certain options for the preparation of consolidated statements by listed companies, one of which is IFRS as issued by IASB. Moving further, let us now understand IFRS adoptions of the future. Several important countries have not yet adopted IFRS. Some of these are considered now. Number 1. The United States of America has accepted IFRS statements from foreign registrants since 2007. In a consultation of 2008, the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) proposes to require IFRS from US registrants starting with the largest companies from 2014. At the time of writing, it is unclear whether this proposal will be carried through, but the general trend is in that direction. An important question about US is which implementation might be chosen. 2. In Japan, convergence with IFRS has been proceeding slowly for at least a decade. At the end of 2009, it was announced that certain Japanese listed companies could choose to use IFRS instead of Japanese GAAP for periods ending 31st March 2010. The present option of using US GAAP is removed from 2016. In 2012, a decision is to be taken about whether to require IFRS from 2016. 3. Brazil and Russia are shown by the IASB 2010 as require or permit IFRS. In Brazil, IFRS is required from 2010 for listed companies and any other financial institutions. In Russia, the picture is much less clear. 4. India, it requiring the use of notified Indian standards that have been converged with IFRS for large listed companies from 2011. This has been extended to all listed companies by 2014. Let us now recapitulate what we have learned in this module so far. Adoption is the act of taking something as your own. Adoption usually refers to legal process of becoming a non-biological parent, but it also refers to the act of embracing ideas. Adoption comes from the old French word adopter, which means to choose for oneself. Apart from the term adopt and adapt, there is also a term called as convergence. In general, convergence is coming together of two or more distinct identities or phenomena. Convergence is increasingly prevalent in the IT world. In this context, the term refers to the combination of two or more different technologies in a single device. The International Accounting Standards Board (IASB) was formed in 2001 to replace the International Accounting Standards Committee (IASC) for developing international accounting standards that are universally accepted. The worldwide adoption of IFRS provided several benefits. IFRS is quite complex and costly, and if the adoption of IFRS needed or required by small or medium-sized businesses, it will be a big disadvantage for SMEs as they will be hit by large transaction costs and level of complexity of IFRS may not be absorbed by SMEs. The IASB 2010 suggests that more than 100 countries now require or permit use of IFRS or are converging. This gives a misleading impression of the prevalence of IFRS and hides a bewildering array of responses. India is requiring the use of notified Indian standards that have been converged with IFRS for large listed companies from the year 2011. This has been extended to all listed companies by 2014.